Hi Laura.
Hi Laura.
We watched the movie. We read the books. The book The Great Gatsby by Scott Fitzgerald, and we've watched the latest adaptation of The Great Gatsby with
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
And today we're going to discuss it. So let's start with the basic analysis.
Well, first off, the book title is the same in both.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's very good book title and film title.
But it's about 100 years apart from the creation of the book.
Yeah.
Just a quick summarizing of the actual story. I'd say it's a story about a hopeful but piteous attempt to recapture the past and also the difficulty of controlling the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree.
That
was
better
myself.
Very well pronounced.
Axel, do you want to tell us a little bit about the setting?
Well, yeah, the setting is it takes place in the Roaring 20s in the USA, around New York, East Egg and West Egg, where Tom Buchanan and Gatsby and Nick lives. Yeah. They also visit New York. I would say that one great difference I found between the movie and the book is that you get a much greater picture of the setting in the film. Well, yes, of course, partly because of you can see it with your own eyes, but also because the book was written in present when it was written about 90 years ago, and therefore some things are taken for granted. For example, the way people dress and what haircuts people had. Yeah. But in the movie, they really captured the era.
Yeah, for sure. And go ahead.
We're supposed to add something about the setting.
I'd say that movies in general also have a unique ability to include music, visuals, voiceovers, and other stuff that makes the overall setting stronger.
What kind of threw me off a little bit in the movie though was that the kind of music was more 20th century.
Music. 21st century.
Yeah, 21st century.
Yeah, that's true.
It was not really, not that much jazz, but more house, a little bit rap, and more modern music.
The soundtrack for the movie was like with modern artists.
Yeah, but in the 1920s it was mostly jazz.
And, exactly.
The Charleston dance.
Yeah, for sure. I actually think, as I mentioned earlier, they don't really describe how people dressed too much because those things were taken for granted, as I said. But I think Fitzgerald did a very good job at describing the climate in which they were. For example, when they visited the industry area where the car mechanic lived.
Yeah. The Valley of Ashes.
Yeah, I've taken a quote from that. Occasionally, a line of grey cars crawls along an invisible track, gives out a ghastly creak, and immediately the ash-grey men swarm up with leaden spades and stir up an impenetrable cloud, which screens their obscure operations from your sight. And he has a lot of details when he describes the area that they are in.
Very specific.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the characters. I'd say that the main characters in the books as well as in the movie is Gatsby, Nick, Jordan, Tom, Wilson, Daisy, and maybe Merle. Yeah. And the protagonist is definitely Gatsby. Yeah. He's the main character, and the whole story is surrounded by him. Yeah. And then it's difficult to say who the antagonist is, but I'd say that it is Tom, because the whole story is about Daisy and the love between Daisy and Gatsby, and Tom is
in the way of that.
Is the enemy of Gatsby because he also wants Daisy. So therefore, he might be seen as the antagonist.
Yeah. And Nick Carraway, the narrator, I believe they use him in a very interesting way, because he's very much of an outsider compared to the rest of them.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the same wealth as the others do.
Or social status.
Exactly, and he just moved to this part of New York,
Yeah.
so he doesn't really know anyone except from Daisy. So, and also because of the fact that he's a very unobstructive character, he's almost every time in the back, just observing the others' actions, and the writers use him as a way to show the other characters.
One thing I find very interesting with Nick is that he's not from New York, as you said. And when, for example, at the parties, you can see that everyone is just trying to use Gatsby. Everyone doesn't even know that he exists.
Yeah.
And the first party Nick attends to, he's like, where's Gatsby? Where's the host? I want to meet the host.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm the only one to invite. So you can see that in New York, all those people that is not like all those other people that attend.
You can almost
Gatsby.
describe them as freeloaders, just taking advantage of
Yeah,
it.
he isn't used to the social norms and the wealth and the status that everyone has and lives with.
Yeah.
One character that I also think is very interesting is Klipspringer. He's one of those who just hang around at Gatsby's, drinking his champagne.
Yeah, almost lives at his house.
Yeah, exactly. And I see him as a clear representation of the people attending those parties.
Yeah.
Just being there for the glamorous and champagne, and not actually caring about Gatsby.
It's sad, very sad.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then not attending the funeral.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And calling Nick
That's-
afterwards to try to get back a pair of tennis shoes.
Yeah.
But now we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Let's talk about the book movie comparison with the plot events. Do you think there's an events that is a lot different or a lot similar? Or?
Well, I would say that the main events are all the same, and the things that are actually changed between the book and the movie are some details.
Yeah.
But I found one detail that is actually has a pretty big impact on the story if you actually think about it. In the movie, we see Gatsby hearing the sound of the phone when it rings, just before he gets shot, and it's a small detail, but it also means that he gets to die happily in the movie. But we don't know if that happens in the book because we only hear like gunshots were fired.
Basically, he dies in the movie. He dies like a lonely winner.
Yeah.
But in the books, he dies like a lonely loser because, or we don't really know
We
that.
don't know
But
that,
all we can say is that he dies like a lucky winner. Although he isn't a winner because it's not even Daisy calling, but he thinks that it is. So in that way, he dies like a winner.
It doesn't really matter that it's actually Nick calling because he dies.
So yeah, I agree with you. That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, and just general with the actual plot, I'd say the plot follows a pretty traditional way of telling a story. Where most events are in chronological order, except from some flashbacks in Jay Gatsby's life.
And it's interesting how they start the movie compared to the book, because in the movie they start with Nick being at the psychologist, and he's an alcoholic and his life is messed up. And I think that in the books you get to follow him from the beginning when he gets to his new house in West Egg, and so that there's a little bit, because they also talk about Gatsby in past tense in the movie, in the beginning of the movie, so there's a little bit difference there in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's because, as you mentioned earlier, having Nick as a sort of outsider is something that makes the book a classic, and they had to make that into the movie as well, and therefore they make it him writing a letter to his psychiatrist.
And also by having Nick talking to his psychiatrist in the beginning, we also and talking about the events that happened and Gatsby and all, we get this feeling of, okay, this is the guy that is going to tell the story, but it's not actually about him.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Because they talk about Gatsby in the beginning, so yeah, I understand what you mean. Another difference, Theodor, do you have another difference?
Well, I think it's like you all said, that the plot is, or the main happenings in the movie and the book are basically the same. I think it's more kind of small things in the book that really doesn't matter. For example, in the book, Nick and Jordan Baker kind of hook up and flirt a little bit like that. But in the movie, they just have this kind of fling, but Nick always seems more interested in Gatsby and doesn't really pay attention, or the same attention that he does in the book as he does in the movie.
Yeah, you can see that. I think second or third chapter in the book, Nick and Jordan were going home from New York to Long Island, and you can see in the cab that they had this moment. They described it as Nick pulled her close to his face.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a big moment there.
At page 78.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's a little difference, and I think the effects of the story that has, as you mentioned, Nick is more focused on Gatsby, so we get to see a little bit more Nick and Gatsby instead of Nick and Jordan.
Yeah. What would you? I don't know if you have the time, but what would you say were the actual biggest plot events?
Ooh, that's a good question.
So it all starts with Nick moving to New York.
Yeah.
And then he gets to know Gatsby, and Gatsby tells him that he loves Daisy and all.
But he doesn't really tell him it's Jordan that tells.
Yeah, that's true. But later on he does.
Yeah.
And I'd say the rising action is when Nick sets them up.
Yeah.
That's when things actually starts happening. Daisy's married. She shouldn't be doing this stuff.
That's maybe the conflict, that she's married and she shouldn't be there and all of that.
Yeah, that's the big problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially in the 1920s when women had so much less power than
even
nowadays.
But continue.
And then when they're at Tom Buchanan's, when Gatsby is trying to get Daisy to confess, he wants her to tell Tom that she has never loved him and that she has always loved Jay. I think that's a big rising action because it leads to them going to the city and everything with the car incident happens.
Yeah. Without the car incident, maybe everything would have turned out fine.
Yeah. So as you say, I think that would probably be the biggest plot event.
Yeah.
And maybe the climax.
I agree.
And then, but after all, the story just keeps continuing after that because it doesn't. I don't really think that the falling action starts after. Maybe it does, but I mean, when you could also say that when Gatsby dies, there's a little bit of climax too.
Yeah.
Because he's the protagonist and all, and the resolution. Well, that is that Gatsby dies and that he was used by everyone and he was very lonely.
Yeah.
And also another falling action is when Nick has to confront his reality with Gatsby.
Yeah.
He's always seen him as this perfect and
sort of like a role model.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then he finds out through Jay's father his past.
Yeah.
And it's hard for him to grasp. Exactly, because he wants to picture Jay as this perfect person that he can look up to.
Yeah. Exactly. If we move on to the last thing, thinking critically about the movie adaptation. So the most important thing that was changed or kept the same and the effects in the story, apart from the thing that the plot events, the big plot events were all the same. I'd say that one important thing that it changed, as you mentioned earlier, was the ending, because of how Gatsby dies like a winner.
For sure.
Because I think it's I think it would be a boring way to end the story. In the books, you would describe his death scene as the butler heard shots and we didn't read it.
Yeah.
That
We
was
weren't
ending.
there.
Yeah, but in the movies we were there and we could see everything. And personally, I think that it was better.
Yeah.
It has a different. It makes the book a little bit different, but I think that it would be better to actually show it and how it dies in the movies.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it might have been, because the endings are a little bit different because of the way they do it. So
I think that the conflict there is because Nick is the one we see this story from Nick's eyes, and Nick wasn't there when he got shot, and I think the author had a slight conflict with that.
Yeah.
Because if Nick was there, maybe he could have saved Gatsby, and the story would have turned out.
Yeah.
And also the movies always has to like make everything bigger and more impactful.
Hollywood eyes it.
Yeah, exactly.
but that's interesting what you said about the camera, or that we got to see, because Nick wasn't there, and he is a first person narrator.
Yeah.
But sometimes in the movies,
We don't always follow them.
exactly, we get to follow, for instance, Nick and Daisy when they're outside Gatsby's party, or Gatsby and Daisy, sorry.
Yeah.
So that, like you said, there must have been some conflicts there, but I think that it would be hard to make the movie without breaking the rules a little bit.
Yeah.
Somewhat important change. Do you think that the movie did or did not change the story?
I'd say the side storyline with Jordan and Nick.
Yeah.
I agree.
As we stated in the book, they dated throughout summer and actually kissed as well. Yeah. But in the movie adaptation, it seems almost as if Nick is frightened by her.
Yeah.
And nothing really happens between them. It's not crucial to the actual story, but it's something that you recognize when watching the movie.
And as you said, it doesn't really matter for the story, but you can see that Nick is more, like you said in the beginning, is more focused on Gatsby and not so much on. So it makes the whole movie more about Gatsby because there's no, like I said, sideline.
Yeah.
So,
just one other thing. Did you guys notice that in the books Tom is portrayed as a football player, whilst in the movie he's a polo player?
Tom.
Oh, I didn't realize.
You know, when he's at the party, at Gatsby's party, Jay introduces him as the polo player, and he gets very upset and says to Daisy, I'd rather not be called the polo player.
Yeah.
But in the book, when we first meet him through Nick, he's introduced as this very, very strong and sturdy man. Yeah. And I think that just the general opinion of him is changed just through that little change.
And another thing about Tom is when I was going to watch the movie, I actually thought that they might change some things with because I recognized when I read the book that it was some racist and things, but actually it surprised me that the movie had all these smaller events pretty much as in the book. But the only difference is that we don't get to see exactly what Nick is thinking. But in the book they describe pretty racist about Wolfsheim's big nose and
Jewish nose with long nostrils.
Yeah, I think maybe they wanted to have that in the story to really show how the society has been
exactly.
historically, and to show how it's have improved.
Yeah, I think it's great actually. I was happily surprised in one way because that's one of the big things in the Roaring '20s.
Yeah.
I mean, like, not all Americans were happy.
Yeah. And also just generally about the social status that is very central in the movie and the book.
But the reason, as you said, it's like 90 years apart from the book and
vi kan sluta.
the movie.
Hon kollar inte mer än 20 minuter.
Nu kommer det 25 minuter.
Bye, Laura.
Bye, Laura.
Are you still watching us? Nej, vänta, men wrap it up.
Så jag?
Men hon sa att hon stänger ner datorn.
Nej, she said she's turning it down after 25
But she likes us.
After 25 minutes.
Nej.
I'm pretty sure.
I promise you will watch this.
You said 25 minutes, right? But she said 25 minutes.
Stäng bara ner.
No. Jacob, wrap it up.
Alright, so thank you for watching. It's been a pleasure having you, and we'll see you next week.
Subscribe, like, bye.